Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, what will hopefully be the finale and part 8 of our scale model build. Well, here we are at part 8, and as I said, I've never expected it to go this long, but I know how time consuming these can be. We did a whole roll top desk build in 11 and we're at 8 for a small scale model. But as far as the hours of the model, we're over the 100-hour mark. We're at about 105 hours at this point. So it is very time consuming and it's hard to know what to put on the show and what not. So we're going to carry on with the build this morning on the show. And I think we're going to get into some of the more details of the back end and the light bar that goes on the rig. So the part that we're going to make, and it really doesn't require a video showing how to make it because it is so simple, is this rear light base. And that will get mounted on the very back end of the rig, just behind the rear set of axles. And the dimensions are pretty clear. The only thing that really isn't clear here is this angle that they're showing here, but it's very easy to figure out. You can scale off the drawing, placing your measurements and your marks, and just cut it by hand if you like. It's really nothing special. The difficult part, or the awkward part, is mounting these little slices of dowel that are actually 1/4-inch dowels that are sliced off. And for that, you can just use your combination square, set it for the height that you want them, hold it up against the edge of your light bar, and then make sure that each one is at the same height. It's one of the most difficult things in a model build like this, is getting things so that when they're lined up in a row, they are lined up exactly in a row, because any inconsistencies stick out like a sore thumb. So just make sure that your alignment is good, cut your angles the way that you measure them out, and that should be fine for that. What I want to move on to now after this piece is getting the wheels mounted on the rig, because I do it a little differently than the plans state. Well, way back when we were making the axles, if you remember, the plans called for a much different setup here. They called for a 21/64 diameter hole 1 inch deep in the axles, and the reason for that is because they're mounting their wheels using a 5/16 axle peg, and in the wheels themselves they're calling for a 3/8 diameter hole. Now that's great if you're buying their pre-made parts, but I don't like to do that. And if you remember, I drilled through the axles a through hole of 5/16 of an inch, and that's because I like the through axles on these models and not these pins that they call for. So where do we go with this? Well, we start by making up some 1/4-inch dowels. So I've made a bunch of different dowels in different species just because I was low on stock. If you've never seen me do that before with the router table and the jig and all that, there is a video on the show, guys. I'll try to post a link below if you're interested. If I forget, remind me. I don't mind posting it up. I forget too. But anyway, for these axles now, what I've done here is my axles have a 5/16 inch through hole, and the reason for that is because I want to be able to use a 1/4-inch dowel in my wheels and have them spin freely in this axle, so that I don't have to use these pins that these guys use. And all I do is, you want to sand down the dowel till it's a little less than a 1/4 inch so that it fits nicely in here. This is exactly 1/4, and it's really tight. You don't want to be messing around with that when you're gluing in these wheels. Now the process here is simple. You get it in the one side with slightly round over the edge, glue it in place so that it protrudes just so slightly out of the middle of the hub. That way it kind of looks like the axle cap sticking out. And then place it inside the axle and slide the other wheel on. Take a measurement, slightly round that edge, and then when you're ready, absolutely ready, glue it all in. Do a dry fit first, and very importantly, don't use excessive amounts of glue because squeeze out can completely stop your wheels from turning. So I'm going to show you how to mount this first one, and then you can do the rest on your own. So I've placed the dowel into my cordless drill and very carefully turned the drill on and sanded it down. The wheel fits on there very nicely now from end to end. There's lots of wiggle room, but it's still, it's not loose and sloppy. It still has a nice fit. And to get that, it's actually 1/128th of an inch less than the 1/4 inch that I would need. So I'm going to round this over on this end just to take off the sharp edge, and then we're going to place it in the axle once we get it glued up and dried. So once this wheel is dried up and you're happy with it, you can just lift your rig carefully, slide it into your axle. You can see it there now protruding, and slide your other wheel over top. You don't want to crank down on this and get a tight fit, but you don't want it sloppy either. Just nice and snug. And once you get that secure in there and you're happy with the way it fits, place a mark on the dowel, cut it off just using a razor saw and a miter box. You don't need to do anything fancy here. And then round it off like you did the first one, and then you can glue this one into place. Now for gluing this wheel on, I wouldn't put any glue on the axle, because what's going to happen is when you slide the wheel on, it's going to push the glue back towards your actual axle hole, and you could potentially seal it up and cause it to never turn again. So we're going to be putting a little bit of glue inside the hole, our 1/4 inch hole of our wheel. And once we get a little bit in there, we'll use this smaller dowel and we'll just spread it around a bit. And now, of course, with this method, there will be some that's going to come out the front end, but that's okay because we can use a cotton swab and some water to clean that up without risking our wheel being glued on there improperly. And you can see there that yes, indeed, a bunch did come out the front, but we're going to clean that up with a cotton swab and be done with it. And now our front wheels are glued in place, and you can glue the back ones with the exact same process. All right, so if all you kids have been playing along at home, you should have something that looks like this right about now. And you should feel pretty good about yourself because you've come a long way and you've been doing a great job with it. But now it's time to get to the little details like the air horns. And that is where we're going to move on to next. Now there's two ways that you can go about this. And one of them involves turning on the lathe and doing your own thing. And the other involves a little trick that I'm going to show you for something that you can purchase. So one of the things that you can use to make your air horns, if you're not that good at turning on the lathe, is a simple golf tee. And these are longer golf tees so that I have room to chuck them up here. In a drill press chuck that has a Morse taper on the one end to fit into the headstock of my lathe, I can just place the golf tee in here for whatever distance I want, hand tighten the chuck, no need to crank on it, and at a lower speed if I like, I can just use sandpaper and sand the finish off of this and shape it to the way I want it for the air horn. The other option there is to bring a live center into the end here from the tailstock and use small lathe chisels and shape this to whatever I want it to be shaped to. Now if you want to go all the way and go gung-ho, why not turn your own out of some thin stock? But all this requires, once you've got it shaped, is a little piece of dowel at the end that's been rounded to be the bell end of the horn. And there you have your air horns. You just need the back little bell section there that they show on the prints. These were made with Gulf tees. Chances are I'll be making my own out of just blank stock and turning them, because that's what I prefer to do. But I just thought I would show you guys what you can use if you weren't in the mood to turn something by hand or from scratch. Well, I'm done with the air horns, and truth be told, I made 3 sets of these and tried them on the top of the rig, and I didn't like it. I really didn't like any of them, and I wasn't willing to compromise what I wanted. As you can see here, I have put air horns on other models, and I like the way they look. But for this particular one, I prefer that clean look of the roof of the cab without the marker lights and without the air horns. And that's the great thing about these builds, is that you can do as you please. It is your build, it is your project, and you don't have to do it exactly as the plans state. So build it the way you want, but for my liking, I'm leaving the top of the cab clean and eliminating the air horns and the marker lights. And as I said at the very beginning of this build, I may add some things, I may take some things away. I never know how it's going to turn out until I'm actually into it and doing the build. So there's one more thing I want to add, and we didn't do it yet, and that would be the front mud flaps. Now the front mud flaps are really nothing special. I have some of the leftover stock that we used for our rear mud flaps, and just to keep continuity, I've cut the front mud flaps out of that stock. As well, what I have is the offcut or scrap piece from this trim piece here along the top of the rear mud flaps, and I've been able to cut a few of the gussets from that piece. They're the same dimension. So now I'm just going to glue these together, and once we get that done, we'll glue these front mud flaps in place just to the rear of this back fender extension. And with that, you can see that the mud flaps have now been installed. Guys, I've gone through this plan, and there is nothing more to add. The only thing that I eliminated through the entire plan was the top marker lights, the air horns, and there were some side marker lights on the rear fenders that I really didn't like the look of once I held them up there. I don't know what it was about them, but they just rubbed me the wrong way, and I eliminated them. I've done a lot of these builds in picture form on various woodworking forums, and I've always said on those forums that there comes a time during the build that you know when you're done. And with this one, aside from the trailer, I'm done. So we're going to stop this build right here. I'm going to carry on building the trailer, and obviously I've gone through the plans of that, and as I've said already, there is nothing in there that I haven't already shown you how to do, so it just becomes a redundant, boring show. If I haven't already bored you to tears with this episode, then, you know, I don't need to possibly or definitely do it by showing the trailer. So we're going to call it done. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this build. I did forget, and there you have it. We're done this one. A heck of a lot of fun, a heck of a lot of hours. I didn't calculate it, but I think we're somewhere in the 130-hour mark at this point in time, not including the trailer. And guys, try it yourself. Give these plans a try. Keeping in mind there are missing measurements, there are missing angles. You will have to use your mind and think of things and figure out problems of how to make pieces. That is, for me anyway, that's the majority of the fun of doing these builds, is being able to figure out the problems to make the pieces. So please, give it a try, and if you do, shoot me a link below to a picture of your build, whether it be on Instagram or whatever. I would love to see what you guys come up with. Guys, I want to thank you for watching me again this week. I hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you, and I will see you again next week with yet another woodworking video. Well, I was going to end the show there, but there is some time left, and there's been some time that has passed since I actually finished the truck of this build and have finished the trailer. Total, all in all, the entire build, truck, trailer, and load took 234 hours. But I thought to finish the show, you guys might like to see a pictorial, kind of a slideshow of how the whole trailer build went. So let's get into that, and I hope you guys enjoy the trailer build. And there you have it. This build is done, guys. Again, like I said, 234 hours, but 234 hours that was well spent. I enjoyed it. The bricks may have been a little bit of overkill, but that's just the way I roll. I just like to do things a little bit different. So think outside the box for yourself in your build. And if you want to make some kind of a crazy load, maybe you want some logs, maybe you want to make some wooden I-beams, maybe you want to put wooden pipes on there. Whatever you want to do, do it. It's your build. And like, don't be kind of constricted or restricted rather by the thought of, I can't do that. Yes, you can. All you got to do is put your mind to it and give it a try. And if it fails, try it again, and eventually you will figure it out, and all it takes is a little bit of persistence and just enjoy what you do. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me with this series. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know quite a few of you have been asking for it for quite some time, and well, there you go. Now you have it. And I hope you're going to join me again next week for yet another woodworking video.